Yeah, it only takes one or two really bad client jobs before you go, I wish I could say no to these jobs. You know what?
Yeah.
Screw it. Let me read the contract. Let me go and get this shit set up. And like, it seems like a mountain of a task. It's really not. Getting a bookkeeper, it's going to cost you a couple $100 a year. They're going to take
Yeah,
care of things. You're going to have it handled for your personal. Get a
exactly.
CPA. It'll pay for itself. Like, don't use TurboTax. Go and hire an accountant, and the tax return alone will cover their cost, and you'll make more money, which means you can say no to the next job that isn't exciting to you.
Yeah, exactly. He's an artist, art director, and co-founder of Kidbash 3D. His work can be seen in movies such as Iron Man 3, Godzilla, and Maleficent. Please meet Maxx Burman. In this episode, we spoke about his work, career, and importance of understanding business as an artist. I hope you'll have as much fun as I did. Let's go. Yeah, I haven't had my coffee yet, so hopefully I'm not gonna sound too tired. Dude,
Appreciate waking up early for me.
did we?
That just shows how much love there is.
Oh yeah, it's all for that, it's all for that podcast money that I'm not making at all. um, did we meet at the mixer?
Yeah,
On
Lightbox.
Lightbox? Yeah. Dude,
Yeah,
there was so many people I can't even remember who was there.
it was a crazy night.
It was a crazy
fun.
night. We're actually planning to do it this year, but obviously it's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
It's kind of bummer. I don't know if you saw, but Lightbox has been moved online basically. So yeah, all of it is kind of gone. It's I guess I understand it, but yeah, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's really nuts seeing how people are transitioning to that, especially the events. Like, I think Lightbox is going to do something amazing online. We just did the Playgrounds Festival online, and
Yeah, how was that?
it was such top-notch production. Like, and they really made it feel like a live event. And I think doing things like not recording those shows so that you have to be there.
Oh yeah.
And having a bunch of things happening at the same time, so it feels like you're jumping from room to room. It definitely, they're finding new ways of like capturing the excitement of being at one of those festivals.
Got it. Yeah, I haven't. I mean, I've seen some artists doing that. I haven't checked it myself, so I don't know what the experience is. But I would think, obviously having an experience, well, having any experience is good, right? Instead of just being bored at home. But man, like I'm a super recluse person, generally speaking. Like I don't come out too often, but I'm missing it. I'm missing like hanging out with people already. I mean, things are changing. Things are opening up. So obviously, hopefully, it's gonna get better over time. So
Yeah,
but
not
yeah,
traveling is one of the hardest things for me. I mean, we spend so much time on the road,
mm.
and I'm so used to jumping on airplanes every month, and being stuck in one place I'm just getting a little itchy.
Is it work travel for you mostly, or like leisure?
Yeah, it's weird because those two lines kind of blend together quite a
Yeah.
bit. But most of the time we're going somewhere with an objective. We have a goal, we have a meeting, we have a talk to give, or a studio to sit down with.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, like it's for artists is great because like if you want to travel, it's so much easier to sort of like combine the two. where like, hey, I'm going for a convention, and then from there, I am also gonna enjoy a little bit of the environment I'm in. So
Yeah.
it's like the best of both worlds, basically speaking. Um, yeah, it's interesting. I don't know, like this whole thing with current situation, like it didn't change literally anything to me. Uh, apart from like, oh, I'm not going out, but now I cannot go out. Like, yeah. But now I'm kind of over it. I'll be honest with you. It's like I think there's some restrictions now that they just make no sense. You know, it's not a lot of it is not clear. A lot of it's like scattered all around. Seems like a power play. A lot of times, I don't know.
So it's that rebellion in you. Like you don't really want to go outside until they tell you that you
Right? Yeah.
can't go
Exactly.
outside, and then that's all you want to do.
I mean, what else is going on at your end, by the way? Like, I mean, we've met at Lightbox. That was like, I guess, the last time we met in person. We've been bouncing around and chat every now and then, but it's nice to catch up. But apart from like how you're holding up with this situation, like how is your business changing because of it? Because like I remember you and your partner, like you guys are basically working in the studio all the time, right? Let's maybe talk about what do you do. I mean, a lot of people already who are listening to this already know who you are, I'm pretty sure, but obviously there's always like a lost soul. It's like, who is this handsome guy? You know,
Sure.
let's maybe get that out of the way.
Yeah. So, I mean, right now I own a company called Kidbash 3D. So we make 3D assets and provide those to studios and artists. And prior to that, I was a matte painter and an art director for over a decade in film and video games. Um, yeah, this transition, honestly, I think it's mentally challenging for our team, but in terms of logistics, we luckily were kind of set up for this. Um, when we started our company, we set up this structure to be able to work with the best artists all over the world, regardless of where they are, which meant finding ways to do that in terms of how do we organize, how do we communicate, how do we share files, how do we do all of this stuff with a very international team. So we still had our LA office that we would go into work in every day, but most people in that office were running teams of people all over the world. So when we had to transition from home, it was pretty seamless. We were up and running in about a day,
Right.
which thank God for that. I know a lot of people have had a lot tougher time with the transition, but honestly, things have been pretty good. We've been trying to figure out new ways of like how do we still have a company culture when we don't go into an office every day. How do we make it so it doesn't seem like you're on video chats for 10 hours a day nonstop and that's all you're doing? I mean, that's my job to do that, but let's make sure that other people don't feel that way, that they still have the time and space to actually sit down and do the work.
Yeah, the funny thing about this whole thing is a lot of companies are realizing that they don't need offices in order to do really productive work, especially like Silicon Valley company. I think I saw a news, about Facebook allowing pretty much anyone who is working from home, if they want to work from home, they can work from home forever.
Yeah,
I think it was similar with Twitter. There's a lot of companies that are in Silicon Valley, San Francisco, Palo Alto, all of those areas, looking at those offices that they have, 10,000, 20,000 square feet offices that cost obnoxious amount of money, and then looking at the workforce that they have that is performing as good as they were performing in the offices. The only
sure.
difference, like, oh, they don't get that gourmet morning coffee and bean bags as a perk working for the company, but on the other hand, they don't have to commute and work from home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We gave up our office last week, was like when our lease was up for renewal, and we said, we don't know when we're going to be back in there.
Yeah, it makes no sense.
No. And I think, there's so many new paradigm shifts that you kind of can make it up as you go right now. There is no standard.
Right.
What we've decided to do, at least for now, is that we're going to all work from home, but once a quarter, we're going to take the company, at least like the LA office or the California people, and go get a house somewhere cool and do a company retreat every quarter. And that makes sure that we can all get in the same room. We can have some time to like plan what's going on in the next quarter, but also like start to get some of that company culture back.
Right.
Whether or not that's just taking a hike or renting some dune buggies or whatever it is, but let's enjoy each other's company, and get together. But we can do that once or twice a quarter and still be breaking even on what we would have spent on rent that whole time at an office.
Right. How many people work with you guys at Kidbash?
Right now we're about 40 people.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. So, and it's been growing pretty steadily. This year's been growing a little faster. That said, that's a lot of freelancers and contractors and stuff like that. And then in our LA office, the core team of people kind of running departments is about 10.
Nice. So it grew. Like I remember when you guys were starting and doing the festival back in the days.
3 of us in Banks's garage.
Exactly. Yeah. You, Banks, and who else was there? Yeah. And Chris, yeah. Well, it's good to hear because you guys are producing really awesome stuff. So where did the whole idea for Kidbash 3D came from? I mean, obviously, kidbashing is sort of like almost everyone knows what kidbashing is, but just for the sake of visibility, let's say, like let's go over that, where the idea came from, and obviously what kidbashing is, because there might be a lost soul who doesn't know what kidbashing is.
Yeah, kitbashing is an old term from the miniatures and model making days. And the idea is you'd go to one of those model shops and get like a model car that you would reassemble or a model plane. And you'd take these different model kits and you'd bash them together to create something new.
Right.
And so this was a technique that they used for things like Star Wars when they were creating spaceships. They'd go out to the model shop, get a bunch of cars or jets, and they'd glue it all together to create something crazy, and that would be a spaceship. So that's kind of the genesis of it. We started Kidbash in 2017. At first, just greedily, I was doing matte paintings all the time. I wanted to use 3D, and I would hire modelers to just like build stuff I need so I could quickly do concepts or matte paintings.
Right.
And then thought, just build me one perfect Gothic castle kit because I'm doing so many castles right now. Let me just get one of these. And then thought, what if we just started producing these and releasing them and making sure that they were super high quality rather than just the open marketplaces where you never know what you're going to get. And maybe we could just sell enough of these to be able to build another one because I just wanted a library for myself.
Right.
And yeah, luckily, that was kind of the goal for the first couple months, was just like, can enough people buy this so we can build one more? And then luckily, we've stayed pretty consistent about releasing a new kit every month. Now, sometimes we release 2 kits a month, and we're making that more and more regular. So yeah, that's kind of the spark of inspiration or the idea behind it.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, that's what most people do when you work as a, I guess, matte painter, or it's a concept artist. Most of the artists that I know that work on like a high-end projects on the high level, they do either use Kidbash 3D or Turbo Squid, or like CG Trader. There's just like, there's certain things that you just don't want to spend time building over and over and over when you can get like model and get that problem sorted,
Complete. I think that also that raised our ambitions with it, because when you're learning a new software, or if you've never touched 3D or concept art before and you're trying to enter in for the first time, it is massively overwhelming.
Yeah.
just even opening up a 3D software for the first time is just like, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
Um, and really, I think the hard part about it is the feedback loop is so long from the time when you start attempting to make something to when you actually get an image that you can feel good about. That
Yeah.
might be days, that might be weeks. But if we can take out the modeling process, UVing, texturing, and shading, and just give you what you need to start to play with it, almost like Legos,
Yeah.
we start to shorten that loop and get people in the game a lot faster, and hopefully make it easy enough. For us now, this goal is how do we make building a digital world as easy and ubiquitous as building a website, and just tackling it one technical barrier at a time.
Yeah, it's I've been pretty, I mean, I've been kid bashing 3D models into my work pretty much ever since I started working with 3D, because it's like, again, why would you build something that you would need all the time and it's just taking time and it's not necessarily an essence of what you're working on, right? So if
Sure.
you're doing an environment concept and like the goal is to design the cool look of, let's say, a building or something, or let's say you're doing a landscape, right? And you are sort of like designing interesting shapes of rocks and maybe formations that are basically describing the environment, but you still need like everything else. Like you still need the ground, you still need textures, you still need plants and stuff like that. Like you obviously can spend time painting it or doing it in 3D, or you can just buy a model for cheap and put it all over the place, and it's just replacing so much work that you would have to do otherwise, right?
When did you start using 3D in your process?
I think the first time I used 3D was 2012.
Mm.
Yeah, I think 2012 was the first time I actually used 3D, but I did remember using game engines as a base back in 2007 when I was at Crytek.
Oh, wow. Oh, yeah, right. That makes sense.
Yeah. Because I remember, I mean, like when we were releasing Crisis, the first one, it was me and maybe one more guy who were working on the screenshots. Back in those days, I mean, right now the game's fidelities are so good that there's literally nothing to work on. You just take a screenshot and release it most of the time. I mean, people still do touch-ups,
Sure.
That's just normal. But back in those days, like, we would just like, oh, like, I mean, the game looks like that, but then like there's so many like broken UVs and missing models and stuff like that when you want to release the game, or like when you want to promote the game like a year before it's released. Yeah. So we would just like build a scene in the engine and like basically Kidbash the models that were available that were made in the game already by the artists in the office, and like set up lighting and sparks and effects everywhere. It was all staged, right?
Sure.
But that's how you would do screenshots back then,
I remember
you would stage a shot.
I was doing a couple gameplay footage trailers back in that time. I think the last one that I remember doing this for was Army of Two, and I remember they had all the gameplay and they were supposed to only show gameplay, and then they hired a visual effects studio to like make the gameplay look good. And I remember doing paintings on it, and they were like, it has to look better than this, but it can't look like cinematic, like, and where's that middle ground? Yeah. So silly, and so much compositing work to try to like fix the protruding or the polygons that were like intersecting, and someone running through a wall, and they were like, comp that out.
Right. Yeah. What is your take on this? Because like now it's less prevalent, but back in the days, like it was just notorious. Yeah. That studios would basically, let's just make this demo look absolute banger, and then people buy the game. It's like, what is this shit?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's such a tough thing because also like a video game in motion versus a video game still image is a very different thing.
Oh yeah,
And a little motion blur does like amazing things to make you forget about everything. Also, the sound design, the music, there's
everything. Yeah,
everything kind of brings you into the world where you don't notice the like little clipping polygon in the corner. But if it's a still image, that's all you have to look at. So you're gonna find all of those things. So I don't know. It's like, what's the integrity of marketing? Um,
right.
and I think that's like a way bigger philosophical question. But I think that at the end of the day, the goal of marketing is to connect a wonderful product with someone who will love it. And there's so many tactics to do that. But at the end of the day, like if you fix up a gameplay footage, is that really changing it? Is it a lie? Or is it showing it in its best light? I don't know. That's where you get into the gray ethical dilemma of the whole thing, and
Right.
I think it's kind of a case by case basis.
There were some questionable games that were released. We all saw the E3 trailers and then people buying in games like, what am I playing? Like it looks nothing like the trailer, you know? I
Totally.
think that's where it crosses the line, you know?
Yeah.
Um
Yeah, that's false advertising when you're just like
yeah.
blatantly like the game does not look like that.
And it will never look like that. It's just all staged.
Yeah,
Yeah.
touching it up, it's like when you take a picture of a Coca-Cola bottle for an ad and you have like the dripping condensation. You're like, I mean, it's not
That can
truthful,
happen.
but you're showing it
Yeah.
in its best light. You're making the burger look juicy.
Right, like those burger pictures, like, oh, it looks so tasty, and you get this. What? You go to the store, and it's like, what is this? Like, it doesn't look like on the photo. What did I order? Yeah, that's where it, for me, it crosses the line. Like,
Yeah.
false advertising is not good ever. Like overselling in general, I feel like. Well, here's the problem. Like, when you are, when you have a business, like obviously there's different ways you run the business, right? There's a way where you are trying to focus on sales and build the company for volume and stuff like that, right? And then there's a there's an approach where you focus on the quality of the product you're making, and then hoping that that's going to be enough to basically capture your core audience and make them to be your advertisers, quote unquote, right?
Mhm.
Losing my language here. What's going on? But yeah, I feel like overselling is the worst, because like you're basically presenting something that doesn't exist, or it looks in the best light, and it's like so oversaturated in a way that it would never look like that in the reality. And so like you're creating a disappointment for your audience, and basically losing them for whatever next you produce, right?
Totally. I think this is why marketing has a bad rap, is because there's a lot of negative connotations around like
Right.
false advertising, these sorts of things. I think this is one of the reasons I love business, is because it has so many different facets to it, and there's actually a lot of creativity, but there's also I feel like there's a lot of, I don't know, a lot of ways to improve in so many different areas that I think we have opportunities now that we can create businesses that don't fall under these traps.
Right.
Because when we look at that, you're right, retention, right, and it's creating a magic moment. If you sell someone on a product and you false advertise, and then they open the box and they're not seeing what they bought, they're not going to come back and purchase again. So you just made a short-term play, short-term gain, long-term loss.
Right.
Now, on the other end of it, if when they open that box, it's better than they expected, then they have a magic moment. That's like creating delight for them. And then they are that creates like such an emotional impact that then they start to become loyal to that brand.
Right.
They look forward to what's the next box I'm going to get from them, and open it because I know I'm going to be delighted, and I'm going to be surprised, and I don't know how. And I think, if marketing can take the long game approach of this, rather than just the short sale, and see sales as not the end goal here, but sales and revenue are the fuel or the gasoline in your car. And sometimes you have to stop and pull over to a gas station, but that's not the road that you're on, and that's not the end destination.
Yeah.
That's just fueling you so that you can actually carry out the mission of the company.
Yeah. I had a point to what you said about, like, opening the box and being disappointed. Like, it can work if that thing you're opening is delicious, like pack of chips.
Yeah. Yep.
It's like, fuck, I was supposed to get a full pack. I got a half, and like half of it is just air, but damn, it's delicious.
Yeah. Or meanwhile, Pringles, you're like, I know what I'm gonna get with Pringles. Pringles are gonna be delicious. It's gonna be stacked to the top. That's a safe choice. I know that if I'm in question, I'm gonna go for the Pringles.
Yeah. I don't. Dude, when is the last time you actually you ate Pringles?
Last week. That's
oh
my
damn.
go-to.
Okay. All right. I'm taking it back. I haven't eaten Pringles in like a year or two, maybe.
Quarantine has been bad for the snack attacks.
Oh yeah, it's terrible. Like, just getting, like, staying healthy food wise, it's almost impossible.
Yeah,
It's
we've
almost
been
impossible.
cooking nonstop, which means we have the chance to make healthier meals, but then that also means we're getting so many groceries that we're just going to grab more snacks too. So it's a double-edged sword.
When you guys started Kidbash, was it like the first time experience for you for running a business,
No.
or you had businesses before?
Kidbash was our third company.
Okay,
Banks and I's second company, my third company, and Banks' third company.
got it.
That.
What companies you guys had before? You and Banks, and yours before that.
Yeah, I owned a visual effects studio called Skyward for 2 years.
Okay.
That was one of the most difficult and biggest learning experiences of my life. And 2 years in, we had great projects, a great team. We did Game of Thrones, we did League of Legends, we did a ton of big projects, and could not make a profit. Just could not do it. And after 2 years,
that's VFX in a nutshell, basically, right?
Exactly. And I didn't understand why, because I didn't know anything about business. And finally, when we shut the doors of that studio, I went and joined Elastic as an art director there. And I spent all of my time reading business books, just trying to understand what the fuck happened.
Right.
And then really started to learn business, learn marketing, learn business models and strategy and profits and all these different things, and realized that, like, it wasn't that, no, I didn't operate the business well, but also this is a broken industry and the margins are too low to actually sustain.
Yeah.
And I realized that the longer I spent in visual effects, that it was only going to get worse. And I needed to get out of visual effects and figure out a way out. Now that said, there's great VFX studios out there, and there's people who can operate them really well. But it's a very difficult game, and it was not something I was capable of. And reunited with Banks and started talking about where we saw the future, where we saw things going. I had been working on a little video game on my own, and so we decided to start a publishing company called We Are Fuzzy. And that
We Are Fuzzy.
Yeah. And
what a great name.
Yeah, we put out a game with Nintendo. Actually, Fuzzy is still around, and we still have our team there, and we're doing it's now like our fun creative incubator. So we have a film and a TV show going there, a comic book going. Actually, the video game we released with Nintendo is being made into a film. So Fuzzy as an entity is still around and still doing well. But Kidbash kind of came out of Fuzzy as like a side project. Our video game got delayed for 6 months, and we thought, well, what are we going to do? We built a marketing team. We want to keep them busy, and I had this Kidbash idea. I said, why don't we just do that, and maybe it'll bring in enough work to keep our marketing team busy.
Right.
And then Kidbash just became its own thing. So yeah, I think there's no way we could run Kidbash the way we do if it was Banks and I's first company. I think we had to get a lot of gut punches and learn a lot of hard lessons.
It's difficult, man. Like I remember when we started Learn Squared, and we had no idea what the fuck we were doing. Like literally no idea. None of us had any experience in business. None of us ever run a company before. I think none of us ever worked as a business owner or hired people before either. You know?
You guys learned fast then. I mean, you guys did a wonderful job with Learn Squared.
Oh, it went through some shit, dude. so many realization moments where you look at what you're doing, it's like, oh, makes no sense. This is no way we can sustain doing it that way. Like, yeah, it's like the first time you make money and you realize you have to pay taxes. You know, that kind of realizations. You know, it's very interesting. It's definitely it's a lesson for sure. You know, your story with banks and how you started Kidbash kind of reminds me ArtStation, the way they started ArtStation, you know.
Oh yeah, Ballistic.
Yeah, Leo and Ballistic. Ballistic, for those who don't know, is basically how to put it. It's like a web design company, basically, right? They build platforms basically for bigger companies. They build basically Gnomon School platform.
Yeah, and Blizzard stuff.
And Blizzard,
I think it's Blizzard, but a ton of those video game platform websites.
Yeah, yep. It's primarily like development platform for like websites, and ArtStation was like a side fun project for them. You know, like, hey, let's start. You know, there's a CG hub out there, like, and let's build something similar. Let's see where it goes. And it was like an invite only back then. You remember that?
Oh yeah,
yeah.
And
invite only.
The CG hub days. That was my go-to place, and then it finally went away.
Finally went away. But I remember, you know, I was talking to, I mean, I had Leonard Tio on the podcast. We talked about it, and it was basically overnight switch. You know, when CG Hub went down, and then, you know, everyone's like,
popped up.
Where's the next place? I think Shaddy and a bunch of people called Leo like, you guys have to open up for everyone now. If you don't do that, they're gonna go to like other places, you know.
Yeah.
And they did it well, and now they're like the biggest.
Yeah.
The biggest. Yeah.
Do you remember back before ArtStation days, the Dominance War challenges?
Oh yeah.
When they had all the different websites competing against each other.
That was interesting. I mean, I followed it briefly. I remember seeing the submissions. There's some crazy submissions going on.
Yeah, I feel like the ArtStation challenges have kind of taken the place of that. But it was such a cool thing for those of you who didn't see it. They would do these character design challenges, and it was like, who can make the most badass looking character?
Yeah.
But back then everyone was kind of split amongst CG Society, Polycount, CG Hub. Like there were 4 or 5 different forums and websites.
Right.
And basically, each forum or website had its own colors and badge. And so you would create the like army that represented your website that you interacted with or your community. And it was just so cool to see how people came together in that, of like feeling pride with the website that they posted to, but like to the point where they were creating their soldiers for that. It's one of the coolest things, and I love that idea of like when people really feel ownership over a community.
Yeah, that was such a different time though. Like those communities are still here. You still have Polycount, you still have, you know, ZBrush Central and whatnot. But I don't think it's the same anymore.
No.
I think it's with social media presence, it became sort of like, oh, it's a place to go, but not necessarily to visit, you know?
Yeah. That was also before there were any resources to like learn this stuff. Like Learn Square wasn't around. Gnomon was still like, Gnomon Online wasn't out yet. So you kind of had to be on these places to just figure out what the hell was going on or how to use something.
When did it all started for you? Like, when did you get your feet wet with CG?
I started on those forums entering challenges when I was 13 or 14 years old. And yeah, by the time I was like 16, I was like winning challenges. And from that, I got a scholarship to Otis Art School.
What
Uh,
year was that?
that was in 2006. Um, yeah, 2005, 2006.
Okay.
And then 2 years later, I got my first job in visual effects when I was 18. Um, and that was it. That was all I wanted to do, and just got out of high school and started working right away. And yeah,
That's interesting. Yeah, you've been doing those challenges and stuff when I was already in the industry for a while. So you're younger than me. I'm an old buck.
I'm waiting for my salt and pepper to come in. I'm gonna
Yeah, it's gonna
try.
come in eventually. I'm all salty and peppery. This is what happens when you work as a CG artist, or like as an artist in the industry. You get gray.
Little do people know you're actually 25. That's what a
Oh,
couple rough projects look like.
I wish I was 25, dude. I wish. I really wish. That time is flying so fast. It's unbelievable. It's dying. It's flying so fast. I did my haircut with my barber that I go to all the time, and I think it was his dad or grandfather who told him, like, the speed of which time flies. It's like, think about years as being a speedometer.
Mm,
Like when
yeah.
you're one, it's like it's crawling. When you're like 10, it's like, okay, it's kind of getting fast. When it's 20, all right, this is like, okay. When it's 40, it's like, okay, we're going now. you know
Man, yeah.
it really feels like that. I remember when I was like younger, it felt like it's the summertime takes forever, or getting to a summertime was like, oh my god, when's the summer again? And
Yeah.
now it's like, wait, summer was last year and it's already summer already.
Yeah.
you know
It's crazy.
Time's flying.
Especially, I feel like when you're excited about what you do and you get into that flow state, then like days
Yeah,
disappear. Um, like it's crazy that it's like, what is it, Wednesday today? It feels
I don't even know.
it just goes by way too fast. But I feel like I much prefer it that way than like, I've had jobs where I stared at the clock and 5 minutes before 7 o'clock was the longest 5 minutes of my life. Um,
That can happen
yeah,
too.
you know,
Yeah,
different sides of the coin, but I feel like if you're excited about what you're doing, time moves especially quick.
that's true. Yeah, I think once you're in that flow state, you cannot control the time, and then you're like 5 hours in. It's like 2 a.m., 3 a.m. in the morning. Okay, where did the time go?
Yeah,
Yeah, I love that. When that happens, I love it. Like when you have that uninterrupted, you know, uh, sort of like moment of complete focus, and you're like engaged with what you're doing and forgetting about the whole world.
I think that's the goal.
Yeah,
The goal of I think all of us is to find that place, that intersection where we're being challenged just enough that we feel like we really have to work for it, and our skills match the challenge, that we feel like we're
yeah,
succeeding, and you get that perfect balance there, and time just goes away because you're acting on intuition, not on logic. It kind of just that's that flow state. It's a
right.
really beautiful thing.
Do you ever feel that with business though? Like, or it's only art for you?
Totally, totally with business. It makes me feel more alive than art does these days, which is why I spend so much more of my time on it. I still, I try to do some paintings a year. I still take a couple client gigs just to not lose my skills. But
Right.
um, business it's a thinking game. It's just, I don't know how to describe it. Like, it's very similar to art, I guess, in the sense that like there are constraints, and the constraints are just guides, and understanding how to use them and where to
Right.
break them. Um, and it's that most creative part, I think, of painting for me, because most of painting for me is execution. That creativity is only like the first 10%, or even the last 10% of like, let me add the little details and happy accidents.
Yeah.
But like that 80% in the middle is just like pure execution. And I feel like that's just not as inspiring or creative for me these days.
Yeah, that the idea of like sitting down and basically repeating everything you've done so far over and over and over and over and over and over is like, yeah, it's can be grueling and not get you excited.
Sure. And I'm sure, like, I'm sure you've done an ungodly amount of paintings. So have I. And it's at this point, most things that people ask me to do, I've already done 5 to 10 times before.
Yeah, exactly.
Very rarely do I get asked to do a painting that that I don't have an entire folder of paintings I've done already, that could work
Yeah.
perfectly for what they're asking. Um, so I don't know, it's tough for me to, every once in a while a project comes along where I'm like, okay, that seems new and cool, and I'll
Yeah.
go spend a week doing that, but far and few between.
It's very interesting because, like, as you said, most of the time when clients reach out after you get enough experience, all of it is the same.
Mhm.
All of it. Like, oh, here's Blade Runner. Okay, like, oh my God, Blade Runner. Like, that's your first impression. Then you get to work. It's like, all right, it's like a sci-fi movie that I'm designing. I've done it like 100 times already.
Yeah.
It really feels that way.
Well, when you're starting out, those big titles sound super important. I think once you've worked on a lot of the big titles, it's kind of like, well, no one fucking remembers G.I. Joe in 2009. Like, and at
Nope.
the time I thought that was the biggest movie and like super stoked to be on it. Or like,
Right.
Iron Man 3 is like, I don't know, it's just number whatever on the Marvel lineup. But at the time I was like, I sacrificed everything for that movie. Um,
Yeah.
so it's still cool to work with properties that you enjoy, but I think after you get a couple of those under your belt, that doesn't become the main appeal, for me at least.
Yeah.
And then you start to go, well, why do I want to do this project? Is it the creativity? Maybe this is something that's inspiring because it's something new. It's a new challenge creatively. After a while, like you've done a couple thousand paintings, like those become very hard to find. And kind of what it kind of ended at for me was like, who am I working with on the day to day? Do I
Right.
like working with these people? Is it a fun time? Do I like this team? Uh, and that's usually what I do during the years now. If I take a client project, it's going to be with someone who I enjoy working with, and it's going to be because they're working on it, not because of the title attached or what they're actually asking for.
Yeah. 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 That first time when you look at the project, you look at the property, it's like, oh my God, like I always wanted to work on this, right? And you're excited. 2 weeks in, you realize that you're doing the same thing over and over and over, and like, fuck, all right, what are we gonna do now? And then yeah, and then like that excitement reignites after a while. Like maybe you get another assignment that you know that is like more interesting than the ones you had before. But wouldn't you agree? Like after a while, when you work with whether it's Marvel, Warner Brothers, famous directors, non-famous directors, whatever, right? After a while, you realize, you know what? The best part about this is working with people, and the project really doesn't matter. Because as you said, like no one remembers GI Joe anymore. Nobody cares.
Yep.
Nobody cares.
Completely.
You know what I mean? And how many years it's been? Like less than 10 years since it was released, right?
Yeah.
Nobody gives a fuck anymore.
Yeah.
Because there's 10 other movies that are coming out. People give a fuck about the stuff that's coming out as they are coming out and maybe a few months after, unless it's like an iconic, absolute iconic thing, which almost never happens these days.
Completely. Yeah. It's leading up to release, people care a lot.
Yeah.
Once the movie comes out, it's kind of over. Those iconic films, you can't choose them either. You can try.
Yeah.
you're never going to pick the right one because it's
No.
so the iconic films are the ones you never think of and you don't see coming. Um, and that's I feel like that's just luck at that point. There's skill, but the amount of things that have to go right for a film to hit at the right time, to have the right message for the world to want to receive it, to have the chances that they take to stand out, the right team
Yeah.
to execute it. It's such a perfect storm of things that you can keep betting on them. It's very hard to choose them.
What is the last iconic thing you've seen in like movie industry or games industry? Like the one that you're gonna talk about like 10 years from now.
Mm. Yeah, I think in the games industry for me was Journey is the last one that like the last super iconic for me that I will talk about forever.
Right.
Uh,
Well, what about I this is a subjective question, obviously, because like we all have preferences, but I'm also trying to figure out like do you see those properties that come up that not only you like and you think are iconic, but are unanimously thought that this is wow, like we're
uh,
gonna talk about this years from now.
yeah, I mean, it's when you think about those, the ones that are going to like transcend time. Uh, you look at like the ones of the past before our lifetimes that transcended. Um,
Yeah,
and
but
you're
do
like,
you see any of them like now?
yeah,
That's the
but you have
question.
things like Gone with the Wind, Cleopatra.
Right.
Like those are the ones that transcended time. Um, and when you think about like what are the ones in our lifetime that have done that, it's hard because there's so much noise that I feel like we've not even given the space for something to fully blossom until it's crushed by so much more noise.
Right.
Is there something that you think like in the last decade that is going to stand the test of time?
I don't know. I don't know. I used to think The Last of Us would be like, oh my god, that's gonna like stay out there for a long time, and that was like a random thing too. Like I was not expecting the success that the project would get. I knew it's gonna be a good game when I joined the studio because obviously Naughty Dog, right?
Yeah.
But I've never expected that it's gonna get so much attention and it's gonna create so much noise. Uh, but I don't think it's on the level of when I look back at the 80s. I think the 80s and maybe early 90s is the last time we actually had like super iconic things uh, that basically spread like wildfire and persisted, through time. And we were still maybe we're older and we're still talking about while kids don't give a fuck, basically.
I think that's
I
it.
think
You're
that's
the
what's
perfect
happening.
age for them to hit us right.
That's what's happening. That's what I'm realizing it's happening because like, and I had this conversation with James Klein recently because he's been working in the industry for a long time, and back in the days, like you would have, in order um to to see what movies are out there, like, hey, like what is the new movie, you would get like a newspaper snippet saying like this is the movie with this actor, and you would not see a trailer, you wouldn't know what the movie is about, you would only see a cover,
Yeah.
like literally that, right? And if you went to the theater and saw a movie, you might have seen a trailer for what's next, or like what are the upcoming movies perhaps, but you wouldn't see any of that anywhere else. So I think that alone created this mystique about actors, or like famous actors like Stallone and Van Damme. Like I'm talking martial arts movies mostly, or action movies, or Schwarzenegger, right? You would understand who they are because you would see them on the covers only, and that was the only way to like see the movies that they made. Like, oh, there's a new movie coming out because I saw the cover, and that movie might have come out like a month ago,
Sure.
and you would get that VHS like, oh my god, I've never seen this before, and that's been like in circulation for like a year.
Yeah.
But yeah, it wasn't like you had a library where you could check what movies came out.
Yeah,
Now everything is like that, right? Like you go online and check what the what's the lineup for next 20 years. Let's go, you know?
yeah, and there was something special about choosing a movie for the night. Like you'd go into a Blockbuster or wherever, and you would walk through the aisles, and you'd be like, "This is the one. This is,
Yeah.
we're making an event around this movie. We're gonna get some popcorn out. We're gonna, turn off the lights and watch it." And now it's just like, I'm 10 minutes into this Netflix one, not really feeling it. Let me jump to the next one. And it's just there's less weight put on it.
Same with video games, right? Like we remember video games, some of the video games specifically like Mortal Kombat and Prince of Persia, mostly because how groundbreaking they were for the time that they were in, you know? Now, can you point any game that is like literally groundbreaking? Like, no, every single game released this and next year. Not every single, but most of the top games that are released this and next year, the only differences are, okay, this game has a little bit of story, a little bit of acting, maybe a little bit of graphics, just a little bit better.
Yeah.
Not vastly better, just a little bit better.
And you look at the amount of games. I think it was in 2008 there were 600 video games released, and last year there were 10,000 video games released.
Yeah, there you go.
And the quantity, there's something to be said about that though, because you start to look at videos and start to take into account YouTube and billions of videos out there. And there's just this kind of mass democratization of content, which means there are things that are personalized to you that are meant for a smaller audience. And it means that it's harder and there's less of those massive tent poles that are just a pillar of entertainment for a mass amount of people. I think video games is following that trajectory, and hopefully this video game world becomes a little less. I don't know. How do we get AAA into the quantity of YouTube? And is that a good idea or a bad idea? I don't know, but I don't know. I like to think that that more content means more content that can connect specifically to a person whose interest might be too unique or too specialized for a tentpole.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. This is just a overall oversaturation is making everything like more difficult to stand out, I guess.
Yeah. Have you read the book The Inevitable?
No.
Oh,
I did not.
Even on a podcast.
I'll check it out. What is it about?
It's the founder of Wired magazine, and he wrote this book about like what his prediction is for the near future of the next 10 years, basically. And it's really interesting. One of the things he talks about is curation being like a massive currency. Curation and personalization, of like personalization, getting something that is crafted for me feels really special when there's so much stuff out there.
Right.
Or like, how do we take all of this stuff out there and curate it to your likes? Because now filtering through all of this stuff becomes a monumental task. And it's interesting to see, I think about this all the time with Kidbash, because I look at Turbo Squid and they have 850,000 models on there. And it's like, well, Kidbash is never going to build 850,000 models with an in-house team. Like, it's just, we're
not going to happen.
And then thinking like, well, how the fuck do you sift through that many models? Like, and like, it's almost like TV stations. If I get through the first, 2,000 models and didn't find what I'm looking for, then I don't really care about the next 848,000.
Yeah.
And it's kind of that weight of like, there's so much quantity in the world. How do we create quality? How do we create curation? And I think content has a lot to gain there if we can start to find ways of like, okay, well, if 10,000 games came out, how do we make sure that we serve the right 10 suggestions to the person who's probably going to connect to them?
It's the same thing with education, where you can learn everything for free pretty much, right? You can go on YouTube, and every single aspect of how the software works and how to create art is there.
Mm.
It's free. All of it is free. But finding the right one, that's the problem.
Oh yeah.
That's where it becomes a problem. And I think to your point with curation, you can see that on social media as well. With like, if you go on Instagram, for instance, there's a lot of accounts that all they do is curate. They don't create any content. They just grab someone else's content and then post it up, link, and it's like, hey, check this out.
Hmm.
That's all they do. And like, I'm curious what your feelings about curation is, because obviously it's work. Like, you have to put some kind of effort to do it, right? And it is effort to do it correctly, too.
Yeah. And
Like,
I think Learn Squared, you guys did such a great job of this. It was,
but that's not really curation, though, right? Like, I'm talking specifically only curation, because like it with Kidbash, for instance, like, it's not like you guys are curating. You're actually creating your own content that is curated for a specific audience. Let's put it that way. I'm talking because I think those are two like different realms too. Like, I think we need to distinguish between, content creation for core audience or limited audience versus quote unquote, like, let's grab what's out there and just like put it in a nice spot.
yeah, yeah. And
Like, I wonder what's your take on this specifically, because like I have really mixed feelings about that specifically. Looking at, hey, like, is it really work? Like, should I be really excited that you're sharing my work because you're getting the attention
yeah,
at one point?
yeah, it's kind of, it is a touchy one because there's kind of two sides to it. One is like, hey, you're not actually creating anything original, and you're building a brand based on other people's work. Um,
Right.
the other side of it is, if you're a really trusted curator, then the value that you're adding is giving weight to where you think deserves it that might not otherwise get it.
Right.
Um, and I think editorial can often fall into curation. Like, you look at like some of the bigger video game websites out there or movie websites, and you're like, well, how much are you actually creating there? If you've worked with a press release, most of the time the people behind the story are the ones writing the press release, and then how often does a journalist just copy and paste that into their article?
Right.
At that point, they're just curating to their audience, but there's still value there, right? Because there's a distribution channel, there's a connection to an audience. And I think this is something that we as artists have a really tough time understanding, that the creation of the content versus the actual connecting it to the people who want that content.
Yeah.
A lot of the times as artists, we overvalue the creation, we undervalue the distribution.
I would say 90% of the time, 99% of the artists.
Yeah. And in the business world, they overvalue the distribution and undervalue the creation.
Yeah. That makes sense.
When you look at a movie that's being made, the people who make the movie are on the lowest end of who gets the profits from the movie. The people who distribute the movie make most of the money behind it.
Yeah.
So there's like the artistic side of like, oh, content is everything. But then also you could create the most amazing, incredible things and no one would ever see it if you didn't have a distribution channel. So, and I use the example of the Live Strong bracelets. Do you remember the like Lance Armstrong strong bracelets? In terms of a product, was it a brilliant product? It was a little rubber band, but they sold millions of them, because of the marketing and branding and distribution and everything that they had around connecting a mediocre product with a great brand message, with an idea and with an audience.
Yeah.
So I feel like I have a pretty controversial opinion on this from the arts world, the artistic side, because I think you can create something pretty awful and still have it be massively successful and connect to a ton of people.
Right. Yeah. I think I agree on you. I agree on this 100%. I don't think it's controversial. I think Do you think it's controversial at all? I mean, most of the people might think otherwise. Like they think like, oh, it's not fair that this distribution channel, this Instagram account, has 1 million followers and they get more likes on my work than I do. You know, but is it the fault of your own or their own? Like your the way you're comparing it to traditional distribution channel like movie reviews websites, for instance, right? That's a good example because like, okay, on one hand, like having a website like that is valuable because like, okay, and now I can find out, which of those movies. I mean, maybe not these days. Like it's so biased and it's so like all over the place, and whoever is doing editorials most of the time is good, but some of those editorials are so controversially wrong. Not wrong for reasons of like reviewing the movie in the wrong way, but like becoming unnecessarily political, I would say.
Sure.
um and so like you're like that just making the waters a little more dirty. It's like, oh, I came for a review, I'm reading about politics, like what's going on,
Hmm.
that kind of stuff. um but from the editorial point of view, like it makes total sense when you look at it from that perspective, right? Like, okay, like I could go and watch the movie and take a word of the studio that made it that this is the best movie ever, or I could try, like, this is the website, they, the reviews that they've done so far are totally on point, and take their word for it, right?
Hmm.
And go and watch it. And if I'm disappointed, then I'm not going to read a review from that site anymore.
Yeah.
I think that applies to work as well. Although it's like a little different because like we're having, like, when you're seeing a work, you're seeing a work. You don't have to watch the whole movie to understand whether it's good or not, right?
Totally.
Um,
And it's the value of a brand. If you don't trust the brand, then you need to hear from other
yeah,
people. When it comes to, Learn Squared isn't that form of curation. I think what you guys have done is curated the best artists and experts in particular fields, and then created a platform for them to share their knowledge.
yeah,
Um, and I think with that, you guys have built brand equity. You've built a brand that people trust, and they know that they don't need to hear someone else review a course. They know that if you put a course up there, it's going to be very premium. It's going to be very thorough. It's going to have a
yeah.
format that's easy to follow. And I think that's kind of, you don't need that kind of curation when you have a brand that's trusted. But you do when it's an unknown brand, or when it's a brand that has a rocky track record.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, this is where it all makes sense. And my question is this, because you mentioned, you've said like when you look at movie making, and that's true. Like distribution is usually where the money is. I mean, obviously the budgets of the movies are like, I guess half of the movie's budget is VFX,
Hmm.
but it's not like the VFX artist is making the money, because like there's just so much work that has to be done VFX. That's why it's costing so much money. Artists are not getting that paid that well when they do that. And then the distribution is, where the real money is made. I wonder if that's where, the curation of art might go. Where it's like, oh, like, I'm building this curating channel that distributes else people's work, right? And then I'm monetizing it. Like, I wonder what the ethics of that are going to be eventually, because like, cut and clear, if you're building a channel and you're posting someone else's work and then you're monetizing it, that's copyright infringement, right? I
Totally.
wonder where.
Unless you've provided enough value to the artist whose work you're using. And I think that's a
What do you mean enough value? Like, where do you?
let's say you're a brand new artist. You've never worked on anything before, and you have dreams to work on a big movie. And let's say there's a website, let's say like Kotaku, right? Who's going to share your work and present it in a light to a bunch of people who could potentially hire you. Now,
Right.
Kotaku's monetizing your work because you're driving audience members to go view that article, and
Yeah.
you're monetizing that through ad revenue. But as an artist, you just got so much value of the increased exposure for it that it's okay that they're monetizing that article in their own way.
Yeah.
I feel like the trade-off there, maybe it's just not spelled out for people, so they're not making that decision consciously.
Yeah.
But it seems like a pretty even trade, even if you were to spell it out.
Yeah, on the legal technical level, whenever your work is shared by someone, I think there are certain there are certain specific laws about like embedding someone else's work. Let's say you have Instagram post and someone's embedding Instagram post. That's been like a big point of contention recently because of the lawsuit that was going on in regards to embedding. But I think that's like a loophole that you could use. Like, oh, if you post it on Instagram and we embed it, that's actually legal, right? But technically, if someone takes your work and posts it elsewhere and that site is monetized, that's on the technical level, it's illegal, right? You can basically go and say, hey, that's illegal. Like, I can sue you for that, right? But then what you're talking about, the trade-off of it, like, first of all, is it worth doing that? You're gonna probably lose more money than you're gonna make, right?
Yeah, sure.
So that's one point. And then like, yeah, the trade-off of it, right? Hey, I'm getting something out of it too. I guess, like, is it a fair game? It's a very tricky ground to step on, because like, how do you go about it? Like one thing you could say is like, hey, maybe we're just gonna focus on just building my own brand. Like, just me as an artist, get out there, fucking post on social media and make a brand. Like,
yeah.
I
think
that's like the easiest approach, I would say.
It's short game versus long game again,
Right.
If you go and attack a website for sharing your work, you're playing a very short game for a very small dollar amount. If you look at what are other ways of getting value, let's say I do want to start my own brand and be able to monetize, then actually I probably want them to share that stuff. I want to build brand recognition, and I want to build brand association with reputable curators. I think we fall into this trap so often of feeling very sensitive as artists about how our work is used, which makes sense because artists traditionally have been taken advantage of a lot.
Yeah.
I think, understanding a little bit of strategy and figuring out what is your long-term strategy for monetizing your art, and how do you use the playing field to your advantage. Sometimes that might mean giving art away. I think there's that too often notion of directors asking artists, or anyone asking artists, for favors, and then saying you're going to get exposure in return, and then that
get paid in exposure.
That's a shame, because what it's done is it's actually put a really negative connotation on exposure, when really, like, for an artist to build your brand, exposure is very important.
Especially now. Like, it wasn't important back then just to get any recognition or any notoriety and visibility. I think your point to, directors asking favors, that might have worked, and actually worked when we were starting to be in the business. Like, when nothing was popular, there was no social media to spread the rumor or your art around, and having someone who's like a famous director or a production designer that has a good connections and doing a favor for that person. Let's say you work for free, and that's a terrible deal, but hey, like, this guy now knows that you're doing like really good work, and someone else asks for like, hey, we need a concept artist for this new project. The recommendation can be there. But now this kind of recommendation is like so much less valuable compared to like your general visibility and presence online,
Completely.
Yeah.
I think it's the question of, if you're going to do those types of favors, make sure you do it for the right people,
right?
where you understand why you're doing it. Because the random person who hits you up by a cold email, who's never done anything before, who wants a favor, who doesn't have much exposure on their own doesn't have much exposure to give. Um,
Yeah.
but when Learn Squared comes calling to do a course, of course you're going to monetize it as an artist building a course, but also
No, you have to
that's
do it for free.
the major value there is the exposure that the Learn Squared brand can have by connecting your brand to it. Um,
Yeah.
so I think it's just about being smart about when you do those things.
It's a very interesting topic, man. Like I feel like we could talk about this for like hours, honestly.
I hope
I mean, from like personal perspective, because there's just so many like landmines you can step on.
totally. I hope your viewers aren't I don't know bored from me not talking
No,
art and only talking business side stuff, but
dude, business is like, I would say, and everyone eventually learns it. It's as important as art, unless you have a partner that can take over the business and do it with the best intentions for you. You have to be savvy at it. Like, you have to.
yeah.
You have to get some understanding of the business, Here's what you're going to learn when you talk with most prolific, biggest art figures you will ever meet. And from the surface level, they might look like, oh, they're so only art oriented. I'll give you an example, like Beeple, right? You look at
Oh,
Beeple, he does everything for free. I mean, not everything for free. He releases everything he does for free. It's like most of it is royalty free, right? If not all. And he does like work all the time, and his persona, his character, like the way he talks, and like everything makes you think that he has no idea what he's talking about when it comes to business.
sharp.
It couldn't be quite opposite, right?
Yeah.
He knows exactly what he's doing. But you look at other artists that are on the high level that only the only thing they do is focus on posting art and talking about art, and then you talk with them. It's like, oh, you have an actual business plan
Hmm.
that is related to it, and I'm talking like the highest level, like big popular figures, right? All of them know what they're doing. They never go into that to get advantage, to get taken advantage of. And I think pretty much all of them realize that somewhere along the way, where it's like, hey, wait a minute. From art point of view, like, there's a lot of artists that do crazy work, but they have no distribution, right?
Yeah.
They are not out there, and they get taken advantage of all the time, right? But now I have this distribution channel, and I get all of those offers coming in. Do I have to say yes to this random thing? Do I have to say yes to everything? Maybe I should start saying no, and like raising up my stakes. And like, as you go through this process, right, you start to learn, oh, maybe it's a good time to start a company, like actually have LLC and formalize it so I'm protected. Maybe this is a good time to hire a tax consultant instead of like using TurboTax or whatever, and get like the best benefit out of it, right? Maybe having like a business advisor to help me navigate through like contracts and like best practices of how to deal with business people, because they think completely differently.
Yeah.
Do you guys work with the business advisors at all with the Kidbash?
Oh yeah. I mean, we have an operations team. We have
Right, there you go.
we have 10 people whose only job is that. We have
Exactly.
massive team of lawyers, bookkeepers, accountants, CPAs. Our head of ops who's running that whole thing. Like, it's what allows us to do what we do.
Yeah.
And it's also we define our departments with like a clear goal and what's your metric for success. Like, how will we know if your department is successful? And for operations, which handles all of that, their metric is that all the other departments accomplish their goals.
Right.
And it's like, without this, then we can't hire more people on. We don't have the recruiting or the contracts in place or the budgets set up, or it's all of those things that need to be taken care of so that the product team, the R&D team, the sales team, and the marketing team can operate at their full efficiency. And it's the same way as an independent artist. By taking care of the business side of things and having a handle on that, it actually frees you up to be more creative, to be more selective about the clients that you choose. And that really is your freedom.
Yeah, the biggest problem with that is boring. It's boring.
Sure.
For a lot of people it's just boring. Like when you have to start thinking about setting up LLC and building, like, proper setups for how the company is going to work and how you're going to account for it all, and having an accountant and then having a lawyer and having all of those things, working in your favor. Like, it just becomes such a burden at one point where it's like, I only wish I just did art, But then when you make that decision, here's like the point of it all. When you make a decision not to focus on business, you cannot be upset about people taking advantage of you then,
Yeah, it
right?
only takes one or two really bad client jobs before you go, fuck, I wish I could say no to these jobs. You know what?
Yeah,
Screw it. Let me read the contract. Let me go and get this shit set up. And like, it seems like a mountain of a task. It's really not. Getting a bookkeeper, it's going to cost you a couple $100 a year. They're going to take
yeah,
care of things. You're going to have it handled for your personal. Get a
exactly.
CPA. It'll pay for itself. Like, don't use TurboTax. Go and hire an accountant, and the tax return alone will cover their cost, and you'll make more money, which means you can say no to the next job that isn't exciting to you.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I've been using a CPA for pretty much past 10 years now. Almost, yeah, 10 years, and never looked back. Like, my first taxes in US, I think I did it with TurboTax, and even though I was working full time, I just didn't know how to set it up properly. I just know how to do basic, like, okay, put those things together, boom, here's a tax return. I got nothing out of it. I think I even owed like $100 or something to the IRS. And then the next year I went with CPA. It cost me $600 or $500 or something. I got like a check back, like for $1,000 or something. It's like, hey, I lost $500. Like, you could look at it that way. But then I made 1,000, meaning I'm net positive 500, right,
Yeah.
from it all. Versus if I did it myself, I would probably maybe get 100 or something, because like I wouldn't know that, hey, those and those and those things you can actually put into as a tax deduction.
Yeah.
Which is something is very difficult to find out unless you do research and spend a lot of time doing that. And that's where it kicks in. Like, is it worth for me to spend 2 days on doing research how to do taxes with your rate? Let's say if your rate is on somewhere in the middle, like $500-$600 for like a starting artist, or junior artist, or whatever. I'm throwing a random number. That's a $1,200 you've just wasted that you could have done working instead.
Yeah,
On doing research.
We talk about this all the time, like at Kidbash. Well, Banks and I talk about this all the time. Is like that there's two levers that we have to the money we have, which is how much do we earn and how much do we spend. And sometimes there's really low hanging fruit in the spend category, and sometimes it's really low hanging fruit in the earn category. And sometimes you're working all the friggin' time, so how much you're earning is really, really high, and you're not paying attention to what you're spending. And it's actually easier to make a couple little adjustments to what you're spending or how you're doing this. And you'll see, your actual end of year profits kind of shoot through the roof, just from a couple small tweaks. And if that's taking 1 week to set things up so you don't have to look at it anymore and you just know that it's taken care of, and those returns scale with your rate. So maybe it's not a lot when you're making $200-$300 a day. You start making $1,500, $1,600 a day. That little system in place starts paying for itself pretty massively.
Yeah. You look at LLC setup, for instance, right? That's a good example too of scaling. On average, 10% of your taxes go to Social Security and whatnot. And when you set up LLC in the proper way, you can actually save quite a lot of money on that 10%. Now, if you're making a $50K a year, that's not a lot of money. I mean, it's still a lot of money, right?
Sure.
I mean, let's say if you save 5% because of the way you set up your taxes, that's I don't know, like what is it? Is it like $250 or something like that, right?
2,500, yeah.
Yeah. So that's yeah, I don't know. It's not a lot, right? It doesn't seem like a lot. When you're making like $500,000 as a company, now that's like a budget for doing something.
Sure, it's a Tesla.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, right? So, I mean, no, 5% wouldn't be a Tesla out of $500,000. Hold on,
Oh no,
hold on.
10%. 10%. You can get like
10%.
a
I'm talking about five.
Model E or 3 or whatever the low.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, it's a Tesla, and that's a business expense that you can deduct from taxes and save more money,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like once you shift your mind, it's like, okay, business is important.
And it's not,
Yeah.
that's when it gets into like accounting and tax stuff. That's not creative. Well,
It's not creative at all. Yeah.
it's not fun. It's dry. It's fucking dry. And sometimes you got to rip that band-aid off. But for me in the business world, that's the equivalent of me masking things out in Photoshop.
Right.
Like sometimes you got to do it. It's not
Yep.
fun, but it's part of the process, and
Yeah.
you just try to get it over with and put on some headphones, get through it, and and then you take yourself out for a really nice dinner and buy yourself a Tesla as a reward.
Buy yourself a Tesla as a reward. That's funny, dude. We've been talking for almost an hour and a half, man. I know you have limited time because you got meetings coming up, and we got some hiccups on the way, but that's good. We figured those out. I got to work to do as well, but dude, I think we should meet up again and continue that conversation later on, because like maybe when we're not so busy, both of us, because that's just like that's a whole like a whole ground to be covered, business in general, because like I remember when you guys started with Kidbash and seeing how you guys grow, and the kind of pains you had to go through yourself, even before Kidbash, as you explained, right? Like all those things sound, for an average artist, from an average perspective, it would be like, oh, like, I don't want to listen to that. It's boring, But I mean, I'm pretty sure you get those questions every now and then. Like one of the most requested courses was like, hey, do a business course, and learn Squared, because people like genuinely starting to realize, hey, like being business savvy is starting to be important.
Totally.
And the funny part about it all is also how contracts are changing currently as well. You still work with studios, right?
I do, and this is I've learned all of these lessons from like fucking it up so many times.
Yeah.
Like I consider my career to be like a pinball table, and like I'm just a little ball that got launched out and banged against every possible surface on the way down. With contracts, it's like I tried to hardball negotiate when I was like a junior artist, and like crashed and burned and watched how that played out. I got blacklisted from my favorite studio because of a negotiation and a contract notes that I had, and it took me 6 years to get back into the good graces of that studio, and then they became like one of my go-to favorite clients.
Right.
It's so much the understanding of like, where's the value, who has the leverage here, and like,
yeah,
when you're working for a studio like Marvel, like you're not going to negotiate. They got all the leverage, and there's 20 concept artists behind you who are clawing at the door. So like when they put a contract in front of you, you're going to sign it or you're going to walk away.
Pretty much, yeah.
So I think you're right. Business is such an important thing, because like if an artist fucks it up, you can lose a wonderful client. You could sell yourself short, shoot yourself in the foot. I've worked on projects where I spent 6 months doing paintings for them, designed a huge part of the film, and was never allowed to show the paintings to anyone or even say that I worked on the film. And like, that's a shitty ass contract. And I didn't realize it until it was too late.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of, like you said, minefields here. And I think when I look at the art community, there's so many amazing artists sharing their techniques and skills, and I feel like if I can share a little bit about some of the business lessons that I've learned or am learning as we go right now, as we're scaling a company and entering new territories that I don't understand and don't know what challenges lie ahead. I feel like that's something that I can contribute to this community in a unique way.
Yeah, it's such a vast topic. Could literally be a class, and that wouldn't like the class wouldn't cover any of it either. You know, it's an experience. Dude, it was fun. It was a lot of fun, man.
Great chatting with you, dude, and definitely would love to jump back on when both of us calm down a little bit, and we'll still probably be inside, so we'll have the set for it.
Nah, I'll be with my balls out running around. Yeah, we should definitely catch up again and maybe talk strictly business, like literally just talk about business and some of the best practices. That would be a fun exercise for sure.
Awesome.
I mean, we didn't even touch upon any of your career at all. You know, that's the funny part. Like, you haven't talked about anything you've done, any work you've done. So that's crazy. Dude, good times. We'll definitely do it again. We both got other things to do right after this. Anyone who's listening, thanks so much. Obviously, thanks for being here, listening to it all. If you like the content, if you like the podcast, subscribe, rate it. You know, the Art Cafe is available not only on YouTube but also Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, all of those places. You go to artcafe.tv and all of them are listed if you want to listen to it as well. Is there anything you would want to plug in? Anything you would want to talk about before we wrap it up?
Check out Learn Square. It's awesome. I did a course there. I'm very proud of it.
Yeah, definitely check that one out and buy it. Like, buy it now. Like, it's the best. It is the best. Like, it's just really fucking good.
Thanks.
It wouldn't be on Learn Squared if it wasn't.
It's true. And yeah, Kidbash3D.com. That's where we're putting out all these worlds and assets.
Dude, let me sell it for you, okay? And then you can rate if I'm good salesman. Go to Kidbash. You know, like, let's say, all right, you get a client, right? You get that client call, and they're like, hey, like, we would really love you to do that. Awesome city concept, you know, like, we have this idea for a city with this character, but man, it's like a large city you would need to build, and we have a budget of, I don't know, whatever, fucking $50,000. And then you, all right, let's do it, right? And then you scratch your head. And it's like, fuck, it's only 50,000. I cannot build the whole city. But then you find, through the word of the mouth, at kidbash3d.com, they have a whole city for how much? $199?
There you go.
Yeah, $199. Holy fuck! I can save $49,800 of not building a city and just kid bashing it. See, that's the salesmanship.
That is the salesman.
How long was that read?
Oh man, we're getting this clip over to marketing to start running this as an ad.
Dude, okay, I want CPM for that.
Oh man, that was awesome.
That was fun. All right, man. Good times. Thanks again. Thanks, guys. And till the next one.
Take care,
Peace.
guys.
Cool. We're done.